Still confused who is whose daddy in Dark? Hello guys, I am Vishal and you are on Capes and Reels, and in this video we'll try to understand the philosophy of Dark and what the creators of this show wanted to convey through this 26-hour epic show. But first, if you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for timely updates on deep dives into philosophies and analysis of movies and shows. In this episode, we'll dissect Dark and probably end up butchering some German names. So Germany, our apologies at the very beginning. Dark is a German sci-fi thriller web series co-created by Bran, Bo Oder and Jan Schiefri. Dark concerns the aftermath of child's disappearance, which exposes the secrets of and hidden connections amongst four estranged families in a small German town of Winden, as they slowly unravel the sinister time conspiracy which spans several generations. Throughout the series, Dark explores the existential implications of time and its effects on human nature. Dark begins its season 1 in autumn of 2019 in Germany. By the end of first episode, the characters discover that there is a wormhole beneath the small town and it connects two different time periods in history that are 33 years apart. Now this premise is fairly manageable throughout the first half of season 1, when the wormhole seemingly only connects 2019 and 1986. But as the season progresses, a third timeline of 1953 is added and the story becomes more complicated. Season 2 increases the juggling act by leaping several months ahead of the three timelines, so we now have 2020, 1987 and 1954. And then it adds two more timelines of 1921 and 2053. Season 3 elevates the game to another level altogether by adding a mirror world, which makes for some very mind-bending and headache-inducing stuff, even if you were able to follow the previous two seasons fairly well. Now, most people and YouTube channels have been focusing on the timeline aspects of the two worlds, which, although truly mind-bending and innovative, is not the crux of the show as shown in the last two episodes. In fact, the whole timeline mess is there to keep you entangled, whereas the true meaning of the show is hidden somewhere else. In this video, we'll discuss the philosophy and deeper meaning behind Dark and why these videos explaining the timelines have completely missed the point of the show. So pull up your yellow raincoats, cause we are going to really go deep inside the Dark caves. Needless to say, spoiler ahead for all the three seasons of Dark. In an interview, the writers of the show said that they read around 100 books over the course of these three seasons, covering science, philosophy and spiritual writing. And it was quite interesting to see that all these books actually talk about the same thing, just from different angles. Thus, there are two ways to analyze Dark: the philosophical angle and the physics angle. The two major philosophies that are used extensively in Dark are the philosophy of determinism and free will, which are based on work of two German philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer. At its core, Dark is primarily concerned with determinism and free will. To be fair, this is true with most time travel stories. If you have free will in a time travel story, you can alter the past and change the present. But this creates a teeny tiny problem of a paradox, because if you can change the future of your past, then where did the version of you who wanted to change the past in the first place came from? Many time travel stories sidestep this problem by creating an alternate reality for time traveler to become trapped in. A good example of this would be Avengers Endgame.
If we can do this, go back in time, why don't we just find baby Thanos, and...
First of all, that's horrible.
It's Thanos.
And secondly, time doesn't work that way. Changing the past doesn't change the future.
For instance, in the original timeline, Loki was captured and taken to Asgard by Thor in 2012. In Endgame, however, the 2023 Avengers accidentally facilitate Loki's escape with the Time Stone. But when they travel back to the future, Loki hasn't used the stone to wreak havoc for a decade, because all that happened in a separate timeline. This logic eliminates the option of simply traveling back in time and killing Thanos as a baby, as the road suggests, because it will not change the future, only create an alternate universe with no Thanos. Dark, however, solves this in a way we have consistently found satisfying if a little overcomplicated. Dark follows the path of determinism, which means there is no free will. We are all trapped by time, we must follow its dictate. The first aspect of determinism is everything is already determined. This was somewhat explored in Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban. For example, in Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban, the characters who travel back through time know exactly what they need to do in the past because it has already happened in the future. Like the future Harry and Hermione know they have to hit their past selves with rocks because they already felt themselves being hit by a rock at the time. The second aspect of determinism is we cannot change things at our own will. So if you are a time traveler who goes back in time to kill baby Hitler, you will still not be able to do it because Hitler existed, and for you to know of his horrors, you have to have lived in a world where World War II happened as it did in our world. The classical outcome of this type of situation in time travel story is that by trying to kill baby Hitler, you instead set him on the path of becoming the great villain we know him to be. This happens in Dark when Ulrich tries to kill Helge in 1953 so as to stop the kidnapping of Michael and Mads from happening in the first place. But instead he scars Helge physically and mentally and sets him off on the path of following Noah and kidnapping the children for his experiments. The takeaway here is that time is God, and on some level we have to worship it.
Erklärt. Gott den Krieg erklärt. Wir erschaffen eine neue Welt. Ohne Zeit. Ohne Gott.
Was heißt das?
Das soll heißen, dass das, was die Menschen seit Jahrtausenden anbeten, den Gott, der alles zusammenhält, dass dieser Gott nichts anderes ist als die Zeit selbst. Kein denkendes, handelndes Geschöpf. Eine physikalische Gesetzmäßigkeit, mit der sich ebenso wenig verhandeln lässt wie mit dem eigenen Schicksal. Gott ist Zeit. Und die Zeit ist nicht barmherzig. Wir werden geboren und schon rinnt unser Leben dahin wie die Körner in dieser Sanduhr. Den Tod immer unausweichlich vor uns. Unser Schicksal nichts als eine Verkettung von Ursache und Wirkung. Im Licht und im Schatten.
This whole philosophy is called determinism, the philosophical view that all events are determined completely by previously existing causes. Determinism is often taken to mean causal determinism, which in physics is known as a cause and effect. It is the concept that events within a given paradigm are bound by causality in such a way that any state of an object or event is completely determined by its prior states. Determinism is often contrasted with free will.
Wow! Wow! Fire! I've got your X-Men 134!
Oh, not that will. Free will is the ability to choose between different possible courses of action without any restrictions. Arthur Schopenhauer, a German philosopher best known for his 1818 work The World as Will and Representation, characterizes the phenomenal world as the product of blind and insatiable metaphysical free will. According to him, human desire was futile, illogical, directionless, and by extension, so was all human action in the world. Einstein quoted his view, originally expressed in the essay On the Freedom of Will, that a man can do as he will, but not will as he will. A quote which also appears at the beginning of season 3 of Dark. According to Schopenhauer, free will is a blind force that controls not only the actions of individual, intelligent agents, but ultimately all observable phenomena. For Schopenhauer, human desire, willing, and craving causes all the suffering and pain in the world. Circling back to Dark, we can now analyze how determinism and free will explain the deeper meaning of Dark. In Dark, the characters time and again take decisions which at the point of taking them are perfectly rational. Yet all these decisions ensure the endless looping of their world. Ulrich tries to kill Helge, but instead sets him on the path which necessitated him trying to kill Helge in the first place. Jonas tries to stop his father Michael from killing himself by showing him the suicide note, but instead causes him to write the suicide note and kill himself. Claudia tries to spend time with her father Egon, knowing he is going to die later that day, but instead ends up accidentally killing him because of an argument. We see many examples of characters taking perfectly rational decisions through their free will throughout the show, but instead sustaining the loop and creating an endless recurrence, an endless loop of time through which there seem to be no exit. Now there is one more layer to add to this. Characters do seem to have a choice and free will in the Dark universe, but the thing is that because of who they are, they will always make the same choices. So there isn't an escape from the loop. These people's choices are shown to never change over time. But it's not because of the lack of free will. It's just because given the unique personality that they have, they will make a certain decision, and that will always happen as long as the events develop the same way as always. And everyone will always make the same decision every time given the people they are. The time loop as it is presented in Dark allows people to acquire experience but not to change their choices. Now that's the disturbing point. The characters may change, their perception of surrounding world changes, but their free will is imprisoned or frozen inside the loop and cannot change with them. For instance, in both the worlds, Erlich is shown to be a womanizer and commits adultery in marriage. In second world, he even cheats on the person for whom he cheated on his wife with. Similarly, Hannah is always shown to be a homewrecker in both worlds. Because the core of these characters never changes. It's who they are, and therefore whatever experience, whatever circumstances they may be in, they will always act according to their character's deepest desires, and therefore their actions are always predictable in whichever world they may be in. Free will therefore only seems to exist. Now let us throw another element in the form of time and time travel. Jonas 2, the stranger, for example, has a younger self and an older self. The timeline, as far as we are aware, is the same singular timeline. Could Jonas 2 make the decision not to trap Jonas 1 in the bunker at the end of season 1? Sure, he's not forced to. But now that he's 33 years older and knows so much more, he wants to. Knowing that the events that led Jonas 1 to become Jonas 2 will lead to him going back into the passage to shut it down, the same way his older version wanted to 33 years prior, when Adam was the stranger and when the stranger was Jonas. There are not three Jonases, there is one Jonas at different points in life. Each instance of Jonas thinks they know what's best and they act in a way they choose to, but every time one version becomes the next, their motives and their desires and the knowledge of world has changed too, and they chose to do the same thing their older selves made in the previous cycle. With similar events occurring every 33 years, Dark proposes that destiny cannot be amended. And no matter how hard Jonas tries to change the future, his attempt only fits perfectly into the original timeline like an endless loop. Thus, people's choices are shown never to change over time, but it's not because of the lack of free will. It's because, given the unique personality that they have, they will make certain decisions, and that will always happen as long as events develop the same way. And events will always develop in the same way because everyone will make the same decisions every time given the people they are, causing this to become a loop of eternal recurrence. Schopenhauer's writing influenced many, one of whom was German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. He postulated the theory of eternal recurrence, a hypothetical concept that says that universe has been recurring and will continue to recur in self-similar form for an infinite number of times across infinite time and space. Eternal recurrence is also related to determinism, the doctrine that all events, including human actions, are ultimately determined by cause external to free will. It is purely physical concept involving no supernatural reincarnation, but the return of beings in the same bodies. Imagine yourself having to relive your life again and again and again for infinity. This is also what happens to the characters of Dark as they find themselves stuck in an endless loop of recurrence, reliving their lives of suffering over and over again for infinity with no possibility of escape, as each of their actions taken through their apparent free will leads to the reinforcement of the time loop, and no character seems to be able to break this loop while being stuck within the loop. This also forms the central conflict of the show, as Adam tries to break the infinity loop of eternal recurrence while Eva wishes to sustain the loop so that her son may live. Nietzsche posits not only that the universe is recurring over infinite time and space, but that the different versions of events that have occurred in the past at one point or another take place again, and with each version of events hoping that some knowledge or awareness is gained to better the individual. This is probably what happens when, after possibly having been through infinite cycles, Claudia gains the understanding of origin world separate from Adam's and Eva's world, where Regina exists truly. Claudia figures out a way to travel to the origin world and stop the origin event from happening in the first place. Thus, she becomes a better individual by sacrificing her own existence and her own world so that Regina can continue to live without suffering from cancer in another world. Finally, let us understand the physics angle of Dark. Since the beginning of 20th century quantum mechanics, the physics of extremely small gain traction and has revealed previously concealed aspects of events. Quantum physics works differently in many ways from Newtonian physics. Physicist Aaron D. O'Connell explains that the understanding of universe at such small scales as atoms requires a different logic than day-to-day life does. O'Connell argues that we must simply use different models and constructs when dealing with quantum world. This debate is relevant because it is easy to imagine a specific situation in which the arrival of electron at a screen at a certain point and time would trigger one event, whereas its arrival at another point would trigger an entirely different event. To understand this, let us take the example of Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. Sometimes described as a paradox devised by the Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger in 1935, the scenario presents a hypothetical cat that may be simultaneously both alive and dead, a state known as quantum superposition, as a result of being linked to a random subatomic event that may or may not occur. Schrodinger's cat experiment was depicted as being explained by Tannhaus in the final season's penultimate episode. The experiment is simple. It involves a cat, a flask of poison, and a radioactive source all placed in a sealed box. If an internal monitor detects radioactivity, the flask is shattered by a hammer mechanism, releasing the poison which kills the cat. The quantum superimposition implies that after a while, the cat is simultaneously alive and dead until the box is opened. Yet when one looks in the box, one sees the cat either alive or dead, not both alive and dead. This poses the question when exactly quantum superposition ends and reality collapses into one possibility or the other. In 1957, Hugh Everett formulated the many-world interpretation of quantum mechanics, which does not single out observations as special processes. In many-world interpretation, both alive and dead state of the cat persist after the box is opened, but are decoherent from each other. In other words, when the box is opened, the observer and the possibly dead cat split into an observer looking at the box with the dead cat and an observer looking at the box with the live cat. But since the dead and alive states are decoherent, there is no effective communication or interaction between them. Tannhaus of the Origin World describes the theory of quantum entanglement during his television show in 1974. He explains the thought experiment by Schrodinger's cat, which is simultaneously dead and alive, and the states of atom can overlap until they are forced into a definitive state by observation. He broadens the idea and asks whether it would be possible for multiple realities to exist side by side. The reference to dark is pretty clear. Quantum entanglement is first used during the apocalypse in Adam's worlds. In the first version, Martha brings Jonas into Eva's world. This version of Martha is later killed by Adam along with her unborn child, while this version of Jonas impregnates young Martha with the unknown and is later shot by the second version of Martha. In the second version, Eva sends Bartosz to stop Martha and travel back with him. This version of Jonas never goes to Eva's world and thus becomes the stranger and late Adam, while this version of Martha survives and gives birth to the unknown. Eva uses quantum entanglement to save herself and the unknown and thus preserve the loop. Adam fails to end time again and again by killing Martha with the God particle, not accounting for the two pregnant versions of her. However, Claudia of Adam's world uses quantum entanglement to tell him that there is a way to break the cycle. He creates a third version of events by going back to save Jonas from the apocalypse and sending him to Eva's world before she can travel to Adam's world. This allows for their journey to the origin world and the destruction of both Adam's and Eva's world. In conclusion, what makes any piece of art great? In the words of Anton Chekhov, the role of an artist is to ask questions and not answer them. In similar vein, the purpose of a piece of art is not to provide answers to the viewers in a plate, but rather to instigate and compel the viewers to seek the answers by making them ask relevant questions. So does that make Dark a great piece of art? We like to believe it does. Since the beginning, Dark has dealt with paradox of time travel by basically saying no matter what you do, you cannot change your fate. It raised very complex questions about determinism and free will. Are people really free, or are we all set to a predestined path that we unknowingly follow over and over all of our eternity? Discussing and analyzing the timelines after watching the end of Dark is futile because Adam's and Eva's world do not exist anymore and was simply a time loop created by Tannhaus's time machine in the origin world. What matters is what is Dark trying to convey and how it stimulates you to asking and thinking about these deep philosophical questions on human existence, consciousness, reality, time, free will, destiny, and fate. If let's say we were to read about determinism and free will or quantum entanglement and Schrodinger's cat experiment in an ordinary manner, such as through heavy philosophical articles or physics books, perhaps we would not appreciate the concept or the significance of these concepts. But when these concepts are told in the form of an engaging story such as Dark, we appreciate and realize the true essence of these concepts, and in doing so, Dark has made some really heavy concepts accessible to the general mainstream audience. Dark is slowly gaining popularity in India as well as over the world and cultivating an audience for itself. In another interview, the writers of Dark stated that India just picked up the show a couple of months ago and now it's really huge in India. The success of Parasite last year and increasing popularity of Dark shows that language is not a barrier for great content anymore. In time, as a greater audience will discover this phenomenal ode to time travel, physics and philosophy, we believe Dark will become a part of cultural zeitgeist if it hasn't already. And as we have been told many times by the characters of the show, the beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. So now that Dark has ended, let's rewatch it from the beginning again and rediscover the magic of Dark with an open mind. And that was the video, guys. Thank you for sticking around till the very end. If you liked the video, please don't forget to hit the like button and let us know your theories and views in the comments below. We are an Indian YouTube channel and have made this video as an experiment to put forth our take on the philosophies of the show that we love so much. If you want us to make more videos in English, don't forget to like this video and share it with as many people as possible. Let us know your feedback in the comments below. Thanks for watching.